Survival games are generally based. They remind us of our most basic need to survive, and how the world's rules are uncompromising. Even so, by adapting to the challenge, we can find our place in any hardship, and even fulfillment. My favorite game by far is 7 Days to Die, where an apocalyptic event has left you stranded in the rurals of Arizona with zombies everywhere. The goal is simple: don't die. That means don't starve or thirst to death, don't break your body in a fall, don't drown, don't burn, don't get exploded, don't get radiated, don't get concussed, don't get sick, and don't get caught by predators. Or, well, zombies. Dying's easy, but survival is work. Now, this video essay is not meant to be about how to avoid dying, but what we can learn of how to live, and even thrive. For this, we find an excellent guide in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is basically a 5-tier pyramid of what we prioritize in life. Number 1 is self-explanatory: physiological needs, like food, drink, shelter, and clothing. These are the constant focus of the game: having non-murky water, canned or cooked food, decent enough clothes to neither freeze nor overheat. Tier 2 is safety needs, stuff like self-defense, barriers between you and harm, and cures against illness and injury. Think clubs, building blocks, and first aid bandages. Tier 3 is love and belonging, emphasis on the latter for this game. The multiplayer option gives players reason to exercise our social instincts, for in the face of common adversity, suffering together builds kinship. Tier 4 is esteem, which comes from having your peers' respect and the freedom to plot your own life's course. In multiplayer, this may stem from knowledge of POIs or being a competent team fighter, and in single player, it might be building a gyrocopter to explore the whole map. Finally, we have Tier 5, self-actualization. It's the need to be your best self, and it's fulfilled by gaining experience and maxing player skills, such as becoming the shotgun messiah of Nava's game. That, and conquering the hardest zombie-infested locations. My intention, as I write, is to ascend the tiers of Maslow's hierarchy, giving commentary on life and society as I go. As an old professor of mine once said, "You don't need to know a lot to know a lot." Mechanics of the game will be interwoven throughout this monologue, so that it will be as much of a gaming talk as a philosophical discourse. So, living in 7 Days to Die. It starts with meeting Tier 1, the physiological needs. The very first task in the game is gathering enough plant fiber to make a sleeping bag. Ironically, you don't actually sleep in this game, but it serves as a spawn point if you die. However, you do have a food and drink meter that perpetually drains, and a health bar indicating your mortality. And that mortality must be risked regularly, because even with zombies everywhere, the remains of civilization still linger as well. There are houses with kitchens, whose closets and refrigerators still contain canned food. There are diners with cookpots, an essential item for boiling drinkable water, and still living traders who sell both food and cookware. Keyword, sell. Gotta work for your dinner. More on that later. But food is both carrot and stick. If you neglect it, you suffer and die. If you eat well, however, you maintain a healthy level of stamina, which is essential for Tier 2, safety needs. More on that later. As a side note, I have personally never experienced starvation. However, a few times in my life, I have fasted for a few days at a time. It's a reminder to count our blessings for the food we have available to us. A very stark reminder. Living for days without food is miserable. You have no energy nor desire to do anything, so all your efforts are thrice as taxing. The spice of life vanishes. There is little pleasure in the things you once loved. If not for the pain, dying would be a relief. It speaks to the true strength of will people possess when in these ungodly circumstances. They choose to live. Every action is a middle finger to the Reaper. Not today, bitch. Not today. Back to the game. There are books throughout neighborhoods and their mailboxes which teach you how to cook better food than mere burnt meat. A cornfield may provide a little raw corn, but cooking it provides far greater food recovery. In all this talk of cooking, let's not leave out the essential lesson of fire making, the final part of the game's tutorial. Not only does it allow for cooked food, but warmth, the other physiological must. Clothing against cold is the lesser priority by comparison, since players start in the temperate forest biome, but they must become necessary in the desert and tundra. Just one more reason to scour through zombie-occupied houses. If aliens landed on Earth and required an explanation about human behavior, 7 days would be as good a starting point as one could wish. People must eat and drink to live. We will spend our life energy, even risk our lives, to this end. We would rather live in hardship than die. We are creatures of temperature, only able to bear a very limited range of degrees. This explains the houses in part. They keep out the weather. We are builders of things, whose purposes are always to our utility. There is far more to be said about Tier 2 than Tier 1. Safety may be secondary to being warm and fed, but it's the first thing on anyone's mind who plays survival horror. The tutorial has the player craft an axe for chopping wood, and the very next thing he makes is a club for hitting zombies. That's because zombies are the quintessential metaphor of threat. In modern society, we have little reason to fear animals or weather, but we do learn to fear people. The vast majority might not wish to harm you, but all it takes is one incident of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. In every person, there is that potential to cause suffering to his fellow human, for whatever reason. Zombies are worse in every way. They look like people, but only as a decomposed, aggressive, horrifying mockery. Everywhere is the wrong place and the wrong time, because they all mean to kill you. And there is no reasoning to be had. They will stop at nothing until you are dead. Safety is in hiding, running, fighting, and fortifying. So, returning to those first tasks in the tutorial, the player is soon taught how to create and place wooden blocks. These require wood to make, and wood requires trees. Trees require energy to cut, and energy requires food. Assuming the physiological essentials are met, you can put thought into making a base out of building blocks. Or, if you've broken into a house for refuge, replacing the door. Either way, you'll want something solid between yourself and the shambling threat. Everything in 7 days is breakable, so when hiding and running aren't options, one's best hope is to slow the zombies down enough to kill them, before they kill you. For better or worse, gravity should also be factored into the equation. Zombies are slowed when jumping up blocks or stairs, and cannot jump higher than one standard block. Striking them may deplete your energy, but if you stay far enough above them, they'll waste time hitting blocks and jumping while you recover. Energy is everything when it comes to safety. When hiding and fortifying aren't options, and only fight or flight remain, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Hypothetical situation. You're trying to get into an abandoned house, but it's locked up too tight. You find a hole in the roof to drop in from, but 3 sleeping zombies were in the room below. Now they're awake, and you're trapped with them. You could run, but if any of them are feral, they'll be runners too. You'll be out of stamina to do anything except fire ranged weapons. You could use your energy to fight, but by the time one zombie is down, the other 2 will be on top of you. So, what do you do when your options seem exhausted? As the Boy Scouts put it, be prepared. If you drink coffee just before going into zombie locations, you get a little boost in stamina regeneration. That may make the difference in having the energy to strike the killing blow before the last zombie kills you. Or, if you make a point of looting coffee pots, you might salvage coffee grinds for a much greater stamina boost later. See, scavenging and looting, buying and crafting are not limited to food and shelter needs, but also preparing against contingencies. You could craft a bunch of stone-tipped arrows to snipe zombies before they even get to you, or hoard a few bullets for shooting a group of zombies and thinning their numbers. Then, you save up any brass or lead you find to make more bullets when you get the gunpowder. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Anything to not run out of energy before the danger gets within arm's length. As mentioned earlier, this essay is not meant to be a discussion on how to avoid dying in 7 Days to Die, but on living and thriving. The aforementioned examples merely serve as motivations for doing stuff. I could make a list of items, both proactive and reactive, but all to the same effect: safety measures against zombies, against the ever-present danger. To name some of the common ones in category proactive: headlamps, headlamps, headlamps. Gotta see the danger to deal with it. Vitamins prevent risk of infection or weakness when zombies do hit you. Red tea helps efficiently digest your food so that you use up less when exerting energy. Coffee replenishes energy quicker. Armor of any sort reduces overall damage taken when zombies hit. There are others like recog and fort bites, but their expense essentially makes them luxury items. Thus, let us speak of reactive items, for when the safeties were not enough against zombie attacks. First aid bandages stop immediate bleeding and cure a moderate amount of health. Honey and antibiotics clear infections, which otherwise debuff and eventually kill you. Painkiller pills fix concussions, which are long-term debuffs. Splints fix sprains and broken bones, or greatly reduce the amount of healing time for them. Again, I could speak of others, like medkits and sewing kits. However, inventory space is limited, and one must weigh the benefits of having such things immediately available against the literal weight they create. Encumbrance isn't good for safety. It lets the zombies catch up to you. Time is yet another safety matter. The heads-up display has an ever-present clock showing the day and military time of 0000 to 2359. This matters because night falls at 2200 hours, or 10 o'clock, and from then to 4 in the morning, it's more dangerous. Most obvious is the visibility problem, making the first few nights without a headlamp a paranoid waiting game. A close second danger is the fact that zombies run at night, and stronger, feral ones are occasionally spawned by the game to keep you on your toes. The worst by far is the 7th night, every 7th night, when the blood moon brings on a giant horde of zombies to your immediate location. It's a thrill to anyone who is prepared enough to reverse the slaughter upon the zombies, but not for the new and anxious player. There is much to say about 7 Days Horde Nights, but that gets all the way into Tier 5, Self-Actualization. In the meantime, we can now at last shift from Tier 2 to 3, from safety needs to love and belonging, emphasis on the latter. So, what can 7 Days to Die possibly teach us about how to live with a sense of belonging? Admittedly, not a whole lot. It has multiplayer features, but at its single-player core, it's a game about isolation. You're a lonesome survivor in a sea of the undead, with no friends but the 5 traders you can barter with. And not even them, really. You're just mutual assets to each other. Forget about charity. If you're even 1 coin short of the item you need to purchase, you ain't getting it. You don't belong to the White River settlement. you're a mercenary for hire. Having said that, the jobs that you can take for the traders will have you exploring all sorts of locations left over from when society actually was a place concerned with belonging. There are the standard residential houses, sure, but then you have the movers and the shakers of everyday life. Before I elaborate, allow me to speculate. At one point, the game's creators had a thought experiment. If we intend to start a society from scratch, they must have wondered, what would the essentials be? For much of Maslow's hierarchy is reflected in our structures. Food, obviously. Without food, society starves. And so, we have farms with corn, potatoes, chickens, and boars. Oh, and Shamway grocery. We need shelter and clothing, so there are savage country stores and laundromats to loot. Oh, but those laundromats need washers and dryers to work, so there are Mopower electronics stores to provide for such needs. But then someone's skills would have to be required to make all those buildings in the first place. Therefore, we have places like Joe Bro's Construction and Working Stiff's Tools. And all this interaction means the timely moving of goods, with the help of pass and gas stations and mechanics. With our barest needs met, we must still consider contingency plans. What if a farmer gets sick, or a construction worker gets injured? Thank God for poppin' pills pharmacies and hospitals. And what if the injury is not caused by accident, but by wicked men? We have police stations and army outposts to deal with those, courteously sponsored by Shotgun Messiah. What if domestic issues arise? There's a town hall in place, and a jail for the lawbreakers. So many places to find belonging as a social animal. Farmer, clothier, shopkeep, builder, laborer, transporter, doctor, soldier, leader, or if you can't do any of those, teacher. Better spend time in a crack-a-book before that. From there, we have all the places that will quickly be forgotten in an actual apocalypse, except for church. Things that, in a pinch, you could do without. There's the poopy pants daycare for when dad needs to go work at Higashi Pharmaceuticals while mom heads to the Shamway factory reception desk. There are diners and restaurants for a night on the town, and nightclubs too. There's a bowling place, a fitness center with an ironic name, theaters and video stores, bars, vets, hotels, law offices, a concert place. Shotgun Messiah has a couple of different shooting ranges. There's even an outdoor wedding location. The only things I didn't see, as of 2024 at any rate, was an amusement park and trains. But I'll bet the developers have plans for that. All of these warrant enough demand to exist, but are the difference between first world countries and second. Lest the point be lost in all of this, I reiterate now. There was a place of belonging for everyone, even jail. Maslow's third tier may well be observed, despite not being felt. Everywhere you go for loot, clearing zombies, and completing quests, you see the evidence of how people were once living their lives. With scarcely a word, they tell stories of our psychology, our hopes, desires, and needs. The player becomes wiser through exploration, without even meaning to. Perhaps that wisdom can be turned to appreciation. On to Tier 4, Esteem and Freedom. Once more, I'll bring up the multiplayer feature of 7 days. One of the loading screens is of the multiple silhouetted people standing together behind a fortification of barbed wire. They're being approached by a zombie horde, but they have defensive weapons at the ready. The game has quite a different feel in team play, and I'd say that the Neebs gaming crew does the best job of showing it off. What do you see in a typical session? For if I am to discuss peer esteem, it helps to know what is considered valuable to be good at. An episode will start with one guy calling out to another, perhaps to show off a new tool, or ask about the day's plan. Check out this SMG5! It's like a handgun, but it can rapid-fire 45 rounds. Ooh, baby! We'll be testing this out in Tier 4 clear job for Trader Joel today! As they head off together, one guy will usually stay behind to base build. It's something of an ongoing competition between them, in which their skill is tested on Horde Night. He discusses with the audience how he theorizes it will go. Maybe he's made a moat, or a tower, or a hallway full of booby traps. Maybe there are multiple structures as fallback points, or ways to make the enemy fall and have to loop around to a controlled entry point. Sometimes there's a theme, like Apsro's Hole in the Ground, or the drive-through Happy Hyman's, or the Hibachi Buffet. In whatever case, the builder's teammates will often return from their trips to see the progress, and give assessing commentary. Usually, they'll ask if they can provide any service, whether in advice or materials. Or they'll ask about where they should be standing, and where they'll likely be shooting at. But what's important is that they don't merely belong, but contribute and have the respect of their peers. Putting one's faith in another man's horde base is a great show of honor. Now, that's not to say that the honor and esteem is evenly distributed. Respect is earned through shared experience. Let's say that it's Anthony's turn to base build. That means Neebs, Apsro, Duralius, and Simon are off to explore, or do trader jobs. Locations tend to get crowded in narrow places, so they usually split into two pairs. Apsro and Neebs tend to be the most responsible pair, because they practice behaviors that usually result in successful looting and rewards. The audience consistently observes the following as they go through infested houses and businesses. Communication about their location and enemies, watching each other's blind spots, checking corners or looking out for where zombies are likely to ambush, keeping out of each other's line of fire, carrying enough necessities along with them and providing for the other's lack, hitting with accuracy without running out of energy or bullets, knowing when to make tactical retreats. That kind of stuff. Those who admire the players tend to form a consistent ranking system among them. Apsro is usually considered the best, while Simon is definitively the least competent. Regarding him and Duralius, well, to their credit, at least they know how to have fun. A typical Simon Dora adventure might go something like this. They approach a Tier 2 location, which is still lower level difficulty. They start the mission, but one of them decides to take a different route than the obvious way. One begins clearing zombies, while the other jumps the gun on looting, then gets hit mid-inventory. If it's Simon, chances are that his weapons are weak or unprepared, and he'll be caught short. In a panic not to get cornered, he'll run around yelling for Dora's location. Dora might get to him if he's close enough, though at that point, there's a risk of friendly fire. Eventually, they'll move on at half health, relying on the loot because neither thought to bring healing items. Then they'll hit a room with 3 or more zombies at once and get overwhelmed by an ambush where one of them dies. Usually Simon. On a good day, Simon will revive at his team's base, or at a former abandoned base on a bad day since he forgot to move his sleeping bag. And until he can get his stuff back, he usually takes from the team's chest of provisions, or begs some of Apsro. It's a clown show. Putting on one for one's peers to save face for lack of valuable contribution is a strategy that maintains Maslow's third tier, the need for acceptance. But I do wonder if Simon has as much fun as Apsro, whose peer respect is beyond doubt. His enthusiasm to thrive as a player is certainly less. He just enjoys hanging out with friends, I think. Okay, so switching gears to the other aspect of Tier 4 needs, we have freedom. There are a lot of games out there which could charitably be called glorified hallways. You go on a set course from point A to point B, and that's the game. Final Fantasy XIII comes to mind. Then you have games of truly expansive, fully accessible environments from the first minute. Some places are more difficult to traverse, but none are outright inaccessible until a minimum threshold is achieved. In 7 days, the player really can go anywhere without so much as having to clear the tutorial. Food and safety concerns will take some priority, but that's what makes it a game and not a walking simulator. And by playing the game, one is rewarded with vehicles to expand exploration. Navezgane is an enormous place. Any conceivable structure that one could imagine is present, minus trains or theme parks. Even gravity is not a complete constraint if players know the basic trick of the nerd pole. By jumping and stacking wooden blocks beneath one's feet, a player can scale the high floors of an otherwise inaccessible building. It's a fine line between creativity and cheating, but having the option is nice. Huge as the world can be, there are game boundaries. Once I grab the ultimate freedom vehicle, the gyrocopter, I set aside a day for just mapping. I'll fly the full lap around my sandbox, hovering as near as possible to the radiation zone that establishes a pretext for the boundaries. At this point, chances are that I've found every possible city and town in my world, and it's only a question of what I overlooked. I'll usually spend a few more hours at that point before getting bored with the map. The feel of freedom is diminished when you discover the bars on your cage. But hey, you can always build a new cage. Why not? There's no actual end of the game at the time of this recording. A lot of 7 Days commentators compliment their appreciation for the freedom given by the game's settings. You can make a larger map than Navezgane, with control over the percentage of biomes, like an entire continent of the wasteland if you really wanted. You can control the amount of towns, the loot abundance, the experience gain, which essentially controls game length, zombie toughness, permadeath toggle, and much more. Every new game is a unique experience. One last major aspect of freedom in 7 Days is structure creation. There are applicable physics, but players can build virtually anything. Most of our creative inclinations are geared towards the best zombie horde bases, but the sheer amount of accessible block shapes allows for some really clever shareable stuff. Entire mods of 7 Days have been showcased by the player base. So many, in fact, that the main game is now considered vanilla version. So we arrive at Tier 5, Self-Actualization. The freedom to make stuff and share it encourages many players to push themselves to their creative limits, to be the best of the 7 Days fan community. From this cream of the crop, we have seen such wonders as the District 0 mod with zombie robots, the cowboy-themed Wild West mod, and the famed Darkness Falls mod by Kane. If we hadn't played them, we know them from watching other players, whose personalities add yet another layer to the game. Having said that, players achieve self-actualization in other ways. There comes a point in the game when survival is no longer the main concern, because players are so high-leveled, seasoned, and resource-rich that the pressure isn't there. This is when players stick around to maximize their skill points in particular build trees, or reshuffle them with Grandpa's Forgetting Elixir to explore other playstyles. When late-stage game loot offers new, plentiful, high-quality toys to play with, it's incentive to self-improve. Improving base design is another skill of necessity, which can turn extravagant when the pressure's off. Here, we get into Horde Night and weathering the storm. There are a few basic strategies that work as standalone, or mixed and matched, or augmented to absurd degrees. There's the Hunker Bunker, in which the player surrounds himself with as much high-integrity walling as possible. This is usually not a good one by itself. no force in the game is more persistent than a Blood Moon zombie horde, and they will eventually break through every block between them and the player. Then there's the classic hallway, in which zombies are given a guided path toward the player. Along the way, traps and barriers are deployed, enough for the player to kill off zombies at a faster rate than they can progress towards him. Next, we have elevation bases, which also limit the zombies' paths to a bottleneck and often slow them on the stairs. The danger with these is the fact that all structures require support. If zombies should start to attack these, they will soon fall. Conversely, it may be that the design requires zombies to fall into a kill zone. Gravity is an ever-relevant factor. More could be said about base structures, but that's the point, really. Any more, and there's a risk of getting bogged down in the details. And self-actualization glories in the details. There are many 7 Days videos online, with tens of thousands of likes because the viewers recognize hard work and appreciate the dedication. It's one thing to believe in the endless design possibilities, and another to witness their application. Real-world empires owed much of their success to the ingenious minds akin to the 7 Days base designers. It's not mere needs fulfillment, it's contribution to the human race's dignity. By the way, I recognize the ironic contrast between my words and the accompanying footage. This is where I would have said that surviving a horde night leaves the player with a sense of relieved elation. Meanwhile, I managed to get my hands on a dick puncher early and proceeded to record the cheesiest, most disappointing horde of my career. Anyway, there it is. Some games are popular because of their addictive nature, others for their required skill, still others for graphics, narrative, fast pace, and so on. 7 Days to Die appeals to me for its surprising depth of wisdom. Having respect for how the world works yields reward. Acting with naivete yields punishment. Just like in life, there is a certain luck factor involved, but victory is absolutely earned. Keep yourself fed and safe. Know where to go to get what you need. If playing socially or for an audience, glory in the skills that we all appreciate, that you may put on a good show. Perhaps the best show. It won't always fulfill you, but it goes a long way. Happy gaming until next time.